Welcome to the Painting Insights podcast. We have been working on something in the background.
That's right. We've actually started a Patreon channel. For the last couple of months, we've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings and all kinds of additional treats, which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
And we have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. So, would you mind introducing yourself again for the audience, please, Kim?
Hello, Simon. Hello, Richard. Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Eshelman. I am an American contemporary artist working in soft pastel, and I live on the West Coast in Washington State.
Lovely. Welcome back, Kim. It's nice to see you again. And I was saying earlier that we kind of where we left off, and I went back and listened to the episode because we still had a lot more questions to talk about, technique and colour and things like that. But what have you been up to recently or in the past few months? Any exciting things?
Well, first we have our first sunny day here, which is really nice. We got away. It's been a long, cold, dreary winter. So we got away. I went to California for a week. That was nice. And so I've been actually recently, just now, I'm working on a commission. And I don't really do commissions very often, but this one sounded fun. So it's for an album cover for a musician. And I haven't done that before. And I thought, well, I checked him out and he's got a few million followers. So I thought, well, that could be good, good exposure for me. So I'm doing something kind of out of my comfort zone because it's not a typical landscape, but he seems happy with it so far. And so it's always good to push our boundaries, right?
Absolutely. That's great. If it's not a landscape, what is it? Do you mind sharing?
Well, his vision, which I'm attempting to put on the paper, is it's underwater. So it's light shafts coming down into a deep ocean with a flower sinking, like a very small flower sinking down through that kind of that center light ray. Wow. So we'll see. I think I'm almost there. I'm almost there.
Yeah, that's cool. And I don't think we discussed this last time, and we have with quite a few artists that have been on here, commissions, and the difference between work that you do that you're sort of directly inspired by, and then the commission where you are sort of buying into or trying to sort of fuse yourself with the inspiration of someone else. So you said you don't work on many commissions. What's the reason?
Almost never these days. I used to, but I think you hit the nail on the head. You are attempting to fuse your vision with someone else's. And I think that the thing that I have to look back at for myself when I think about commissions is, why am I painting? What's the purpose of it? And the purpose of it is to say something that's inside of me. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing commissions. In fact, I took this one on partially because it's another artist. So this one-on-one collaboration, he's a musician. I thought his idea was cool and I liked his music. So I thought, okay, let's give it a go. As opposed to somebody saying, could you paint my dog? And I want it, facing forward with whatever. It's just, to me, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, I think that art, at least coming from me, is at this point in my life more about that ability to communicate with the viewer in a way that's personal. And if it's a commission, it's suddenly, it's not really personal. I've got somebody else's voice that they're saying what they want me to say, not what I want to say. And, I used to do a lot more commissions, but as I've gotten older and I don't really feel like I have to be totally frank. I just don't see the point. There's a lot of, it could go into a downward spiral quickly if you don't pick your clients wisely. I've heard many horror stories. I've never had one personally, but I'd prefer to steer clear.
Yeah, that's understandable. And I like that idea that you talk about it being a collaboration rather than a commission. And, often what will happen with commissions, like you're saying, a pet portrait or something, you'll get maybe 20 photographs in to look at and say this position or this position. And, I think the difficulty is, I would never do a pet commission. But I'm rubbish at painting animals. Some people are really good, but I think often with it is that some of the photographic resources that you're getting are not sort of, say, studio photographic resources. So you're really having to, reach and to tap into your creativity. But that idea that it's a collaboration, I think, it's much freer. You sort of feel as though it's two, like you say, two creative minds meeting and working something out.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not just do this to get, I'll pay you to recreate something that's in my head. Yeah, it's really the idea of the collaboration, like you said. That's the only reason I took this on, and because I will get some exposure this way, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We're hardworking artists, and we need every kind of break we can get, right?
Absolutely, and it's a new audience as well.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
That crossover of sort of mediums, and if it's a musician, and also, album covers, single covers are kind of iconic as well. You never know, they may be one of those collector's items that someone has on vinyl in 50 years time or whatever.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, absolutely. So how about your own work? What have you been working on? Has winter brought any inspiration, like fruit trees?
Winter never really brings a lot of inspiration for me. I am not a cold weather person. And so I've really been working through the winter blues, to be totally frank. A lot happened last year for me, just in my personal life. I had a knee surgery. I had injured my knee biking. And so I had knee surgery last June, and that really took the wind out of my sails for almost a year as far as painting and just everything in life. I'm finally back to, it's totally fine. I'm able to be the active person I want to be. And so back in the studio. But really, that along with winter and stopping teaching last year, which took a lot of time, I feel like I've been having this slow ramp up back into my creative self. And it can be a struggle to not just be on and be on fire, but we have to be gentle with ourselves, I think, sometimes, because I can't remember who said it, a virtual fellow artist friend of mine who said, we're not machines. And the way that I tend to work, when I am in the zone, if you will, I tend to really be prolific. But it's almost like over the months, I'll be very prolific, and then I'll kind of wind down for a few months. I have found that this is just my MO. And so I feel like I've been on the upswing, but I've been working smaller. So working 9x12s, 12x16s. And in some ways I feel like, okay, once I can get back up to a 18x24 or a bigger format, then I'll feel like I'm really back to where I want to be.
And you feel like momentum building?
I do.
Good.
Yeah, I do. I feel like I've been waiting for inspiration, which is a horrible thing to do because everybody knows that inspiration comes while you're working and that you have to put the work in, right? But all of us also, I think it's that dance of procrastination. And I can be fairly good at that at times.
Yes.
I'm a good dancer.
Yeah. But you kind of have to be sort of present, and it's something we've touched on with other artists, and I talk about it, that you're always sort of primed to work, and inspiration, I can't remember who said it, an artist, that inspiration will find you at the easel or at the writing desk or whatever, that it's one of those things, but you kind of have to be there. And I felt myself recently, because I'm doing lots of other stuff, teaching and things like that, that I haven't been close enough to the easel for when that inspiration hits, and I think as artists, we've got to be very, very mindful of that, but, inspiration is something that will find you working, but you kind of have to be in the space and primed for it in that sense.
Definitely. For a long time, I thought that I did not work well under pressure. And I am finding that sometimes when I'm in that dance of procrastination, pressure or a deadline is in fact what can get me off my get off the laurels and get moving. In fact, I recently wrapped up a video that I am doing for it's called Pastel Live. It's have you heard of Eric Rhodes? Eric Rhodes.
Oh yeah.
School Live. So they do a Pastel Live, and it's this coming September. So it's months out, but they want it done early. So of course, I get the video done early. So I found, okay, I've got to get this done, And so I just went out one morning. It was snowy and icky, and I went out to my field and took a bunch of photos, and I thought, wow, okay, maybe I'll try a snow scene. And I really got into it. And I did a complete painting in 45 minutes, after editing, of course, but the perfect amount of time they wanted. And I felt like, okay, I need to force myself sometimes to do this. And the same thing after I finish this commission, I'm actually doing Art School Live with Eric Rhodes in April, at the end of April. And so that will be a live demo. And so I had been thinking to myself, well, I better really get back in the studio and start finding some inspiration. So I think that, we change all the time. And I'm finding now that I need to sometimes have that pressure in order to get the momentum going again. And so I've put that on myself by accepting those things like a commission and doing Art School Live and things like that, partially in the hopes of, okay, I'm going to force that creative muse back. And
absolutely,
it's working.
Yeah. And it's that thing of sometimes you need external deadlines or external motivation in that, and that can then spark internal deadlines and drive. And I find it, even though I moan about it sometimes when I've got a deadline, doing it sort of always pressure, but I think it can spark that momentum inside yourself.
Yes. And I think also, just for me personally, we're all at different journeys. We're all at different parts of the journey, I should say. And, you know, I haven't entered any competitions this year. I think that as we progress on our journey, our goals change. And I think part of it for me has been, well, what is my goal now? You know, and figuring that out has been, you know, I think that our goals are always changing, and that's what keeps things interesting. But I think figuring that out. And that is part of sometimes when you're not sure what your next goal is, like, okay, I've done that. Do I want to go? I guess one thing that's exciting that I am excited about, and I don't think that it happened I don't remember honestly if we discussed this, but I made Master Circle in the International Association of Pastel Societies. And so this year in June, I'm going to Albuquerque to get my medal, and that's a big deal to me. So that is a goal that I've been really excited to achieve. And so I've achieved it. And I think that sometimes, let's just be totally honest, when you have been looking forward to something for so long and then you achieve it, you're like, oh, well, what now? Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's great. Well done. I mean,
thank you. I hope that makes sense. And I don't mean to be an Eeyore or moaning about it. I'm just being honest that I, you know, think sometimes we have to reset our goals and it can be difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's it reminded me in a totally different field, but in boxing, Tyson Fury, you know, for many years he just wanted to be the world champion, you know, heavyweight world champion, and trained all as a kid, and then he became the heavyweight world champion and slipped into a massive depression afterwards, because it was that thing where you sort of achieve and you say, now what?
Right.
You know, so, but I think within art and something like that I guess in boxing, once you're the world champion, where do you go apart from trying to keep it? But there are so many different micro achievements, other achievements along the way that you can just sort of shift your attention to.
And I also think that sometimes it's easy to get lost in, again, the purpose of why we're doing this. And, you know, for me, a lot of it is, yes, I want it to be a communication, but it's an outlet for my own voice. Even if, you know, I can't say if it was just in a vacuum, would I still continue to want to paint if there was nobody in the universe but me? I don't know. But it's an outlet. And so we can get distracted by all this. Oh, I've achieved this, or okay, now I'll be on Art School Live. I've achieved the master status. I'm in galleries and this and that. And now what? And those are all fine and good and wonderful. And I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to do those things. It's really, I think what, if anything, I realize is that those things aren't really that important. And that's why there was a little bit of disappointment, because what's really important is to keep the spark of creativity alive. And it's easy to get mired down when you're thinking about all that other stuff, like those goals. And instead to have the freedom to say, you know, all I want to do is just go paint and not worry about how it turns out, except for me, except for the vision that I have, period.
Absolutely. You know? I totally align with that, because it, you know, it's one of those things when you're painting, you're always trying to make your best painting. You know, people say to me, what's your favorite painting? I say, the next one I'm going to create, that's going to be my favorite ever. And that's the real challenge. I mean, that, you know, I get good sales, you know, get good teaching, to all of that kind of stuff. Of course it helps and it's great, but the biggest achievement for me is one that I don't think I'll ever be able to get, and that's actually being truly satisfied with a painting. So, you know, that's that key thing. Yeah. And I mean, everything else is great, and of course it, you know, it feels good. It's good achievements, and what we can make a living off it is fantastic. But there's still that drive in me to achieve the unattainable in many ways, and that's what keeps me going.
Well, that's what makes you a great artist, Richard.
Thanks.
And for all the angst of us artists, wonderful. We get to do what we want, and absolutely thrilled about it. So overall, life is good, and I'm glad that I can have these problems instead of something more serious like this, so many other worse, terrible things going on in the world. And we have this wonderful opportunity to express ourselves in this beautiful way.
Completely. Simon, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't segue from what we've just said, but
no worries.
If you forgive me, I want to take you back to the commission for the band, because I had a question about where are you going to get or where have you been getting your references from to do a picture from under the water? How are you doing that?
Yeah. So the musician sent me a little drawing that he did himself and said, this is the general idea of what I want. I want it to be a daffodil. And he sent me a picture, like almost a cartoon of a daffodil. And so, and it was really cute. I mean, it was done with like crayons. And so, what I will generally do in that situation is I'll go look at like Pixabay or a free reference site where there's royalty-free photos. So I can look at a variety of, okay, I know what he wants in general. Let me take a look, and I'm going to gather some different ideas from multiple, royalty-free photos. And then I'll do basically a little study, like a little color study, and then not just color, but a composition, and, take from multiple sources like that, and then do the creation.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know how much you'd be able to do from imagination as well, because surely you have a kind of a library of reference from your experience as well.
I mean, I think that if it was more of something that I'm used to, if he said, I want a deer in a forest at sunrise, well, I could much more easily create that from my imagination. I'm a forest girl. I'm not a beach girl. So I don't now I am hoping that we're going to get to go scuba diving in Greece this year. I'm super excited. We're going with a set of friends, and we're renting a boat for a week and going to Athens, and we're gonna sail for a week there. And so I'm hoping I'm going to be an underwater girl.
Yeah.
Gosh, wouldn't it be cool if I could get underwater photos? I don't know.
You're going to get your perfect reference in Greece.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't that be awesome? It's a little bit scary sometimes on that note to branch out, right? Because I think we talked about this last time, but I'm known for my trees and the sunlight and all of those things. But, and Richard, just to go back for a minute to talking about, well, what's next? And always trying to, you have to keep that momentum alive and that creativity alive. And I think part of it is challenging ourselves and branching out, even though it's scary. And so thinking, okay, I'm going to do some ocean scenes in Greece, or, I'm going to do these different subjects that I'm probably not very good at, but I'm happy to say that the musician is happy so far. I sent him a picture last night of what I'm doing, and he said it was exactly what he's been hoping for. So, woo, good news there.
Anything less.
Well, I'm glad that one of us feels that way. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always that, and back to the commission, says that extra thing isn't there. That anxiety around it, because again, it's sort of it's someone else's vision, and when we paint our own thing, if it's aligns with your vision. But if it's someone else's, you always that anxiety. It's like, well, I can see in it the beauty, but can they? And
in this case, he actually gave me quite a bit of, he wrote down a lot of saying, I want desaturated colors. I want a very romantic feel. I want, I want the center of light beam. I want this and that. And, so he gave me this very visual description, which I think really helped, as opposed to just some commission with a photograph from somebody that's not an artist, even though he's not a visual artist, he's still an artist. And so having that additional input was really helpful. But I agree with you, the anxiety, is of doing a commission in general is who wants added anxiety?
Absolutely. So this is a segue, I guess, into process and to talking about your process. And so if you're working on, say, one of your paintings, it's something that's from that you think this is going to make a great painting. We talked in the previous podcast about you using photographic resources. And you're also saying that sometimes that it becomes, as every painting from a photographic resource should do, becomes its own thing. Do you work from multiple photographs? How do you go about that? Do you put them up on the wall?
What I generally do is I'll work from one photograph, and it changes a lot. But what I'll generally do is I'll scroll through my phone, and I have thousands of photos on there that I take of the property that we live on or nearby or wherever I'm at. And I'll look for composition that's pleasing to me in a very small, like a thumbnail. And then what I'll really do is just put my phone up on a holder next to my easel, and I'll use the photo on my phone. And I'll use that as a stepping off point. I feel like, because I am mostly a studio painter, what I will often do is I'll be honest, I'm lazy. And I don't always do like a values or a color study or a thumbnail. I just want to jump right in. I'm like, ooh, what could I do with this? And sometimes the excitement to me is seeing how it turns out as I go. Now that doesn't always make for every piece to be successful. But that said, I can always scrape off. And sometimes if it's not going in the direction I want, then scraping off or, painting over it or whatever, using fixative, just adds more layers and more texture and a deeper dimension to the piece. So sometimes what I will do is use the markup on my phone, and let's say that I'll start a piece and then I'll take a photo of it. So what I'll really end up doing is working from the painting itself. Like I'll let the painting tell me what's going to happen. So I'll start by working with a reference, like a photo reference that I've taken of my field, say. I'll start an initial block in on the piece, and I'll take a photo of the painting. And I do this often throughout the process. And, the more that I progress as an artist, the more photos I tend to take of my work and step back for longer periods of time. Instead of just doing one piece in 2 hours, it'll take me 2 or 3 days, even if it's a smaller piece, because I think about it more and I look at it on my phone. I'll go out and look at it on the easel. And then sometimes I'll mark up like, oh, I think the field should maybe be up here. And I'll just take the marker, just very, very basic on my iPhone. I don't even know it's just what it's called, but just the marker, and put it there and look at it and say, yeah, I like that. And then I'll go and make the changes on the piece itself and take another photo. So in some ways, the painting is informing itself.
Yeah, I think that really goes to show an interesting process in using technology. And Simon did a Patreon with Tad Retz earlier, and we interviewed Tad Retz before, and he uses Photoshop and he uses all kind of things. Yeah, he's a traditional oil painter in that sense. I mean, he uses acrylic and gouache as well. But I really love what you're saying there, because you're sort of working from photography in a very creative and dynamic way. Whereas I think a lot of artists and a lot of beginner artists will sort of take the photograph and are trying to copy it, but really you're using it as a springboard to then sort of evolve. But then actually using photographs of your own work, then the painting and going in, and I know the markup tool, I mean, it's not Photoshop, it's a very basic tool, but it's really, really helpful. And I did it
enough to use Photoshop.
yeah, it's a bit too complicated. I mean, even for me, but I mean, I don't so much anymore, but I used to, where, and especially when I was learning about colour, where I would take photographs of my work and then go and like whack filters on it during the process and think, I really want to get that kind of sepia tone going on over the whole thing, or do strange things, and like even go in and like crop a photograph of one of my paintings and say, I want to paint that part on a bigger scale.
Using my phone is a really big part of my process.
Yeah.
I mean, I find formats that way. I'll, zoom in and find more interesting parts of the composition. I mean, I think that a lot of artists and painters, in some ways might find that cheating, or I don't know if they do. I don't really care. I mean, back before we had a phone, then you had to go out and do it this way. But, we are evolving with our times. And why wouldn't I use this technology that is available to me? Oftentimes, I will go in and, I'll take a photo, and if I'll think, oh, this is interesting. This is an interesting composition. Once I crop it this way, if I'm having a hard time seeing the values, I'll go in and play with the contrast and say, okay, I can really see, because I love to play with color. And so, but the most important thing is really the values, right? If we have that value structure correct. So a lot of times in a scene that I want to paint, a lot of sunlight coming through at a sunset or a sunrise, which, I'm not a big plein air painter. And so it's a completely different animal, because as a plein air painter, you've got 20 minutes maybe to capture that sun. But I want to really get into it. I want to get intricate. I want to spend days working on it. I love doing that. It's the style that I like. And so I rely on the photograph to do that, to help me to a certain extent, to say, okay, this is what I saw. I remember now. But sometimes, photos lie. They're not very accurate. They're not, they don't give you very good color. They're blown out, too dark, this or that. So you can adjust them to a certain extent. You can say, okay, let's really increase that saturation or increase that contrast. But it really is just a jumping off point, because, even if I really saturated it and upped the contrast, to me, looking at a photo like that still looks really fake and, photo generated. And that's not what I'm going for either. So if anything, I just look at it as a helpful tool to help me say, okay, I see, like I said, that this is a little more contrasted here. So I'm going to really play that up, or maybe even, that gives me an idea. It gives me ideas.
Yeah. And it's interesting with you were saying earlier about, some artists may say it's cheating. I mean, some do, and I think we're talking to Andrew Tischler about this, and he was saying there was this young artist that was really good or something, and someone found out he was using a projector, and he had all of these people in his comments saying it was cheating. But I mean, my answer to that is, I mean, the camera obscura, camera lucida, I mean, these were things that people were developing like a long time to aid in the technical side of artistry. I mean, paintbrushes.
Yes, I mean, the whole bag of worms, certainly. I personally don't use a projector or anything like that. I prefer just freestyle, but there's nothing wrong with someone that wants to do that. I think that part of where it's going these days that is a little bit stickier is with AI. I was in an administrative group for a society that I belong to, and we discovered that an award winner for a contest had used AI generated material and incorporated it into their painting. And that was an issue, just at least amongst some artists, some of us artists, because, well, I mean, what is original? Is that originality? Is that, now personally, I would rather just go out. I find my inspiration here. Like it kind of helps me to go out and be with nature. It's part of this kind of disappearing world. Like, I've got this 18 acres of forest that just disappeared in front of my house. It feels like the forest was stolen, and my husband laughs at me and says it wasn't ours. Well, I guess it belonged to the loggers that bought it. Maybe I'm just a bleeding heart, and it's sad to me, but so I want to go out and be in nature and get those photographs and then come back in and translate it into something that will last hopefully longer than I will. To me, the AI stuff, that's not my vision. That's like a bunch of art online that a computer is taking and creating something new with. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I do think that is some sticky areas for the future that I know a lot of artists are up in arms about.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, isn't it? If you go onto threads, there's a lot of discussion about that. I think, and I've said this before, I think Timon and I talked about it as well, that brush hairs in a painting, AI can't do that. These little imperfections, and that's what makes what we do as artists both difficult, unique, and treasured by so many people, because it is not machine learned. It's far from it.
I don't think it'll ever take over. I know that a lot of artists have had that concern. I'm not worried about it. There's always, humanity always wants the human touch. It's special, it's different, and will never be taken over by AI. So I really am not worried about it. And if somebody wants to use it, more power to them. Great. Absolutely. Go for it. All the best to you, bro. It's just not for me, but so, projectors, this, that. I mean, are you going to make your own paint? Are you not a real artist if you're not making your own paint? The list goes on, whatever, So I'm just out there, hopefully having fun most of the time with the process. And, I hope that your listeners will do the same.
Yeah. And it's, people find their own ways in a sense. And I mean, there's so many different approaches and tools to use, and just sort of embrace that process. There isn't a right way or wrong way to do it. For some people it might be plein air, and they're out there just absorbing it all and capturing it in real time. For me, I don't do that. I take a lot of photos, but I don't work on photos. The key is just to always be looking at how it can feed into your process and your art. is this useful for me? Is it not? You know, you've got to try it all in a way. Should we talk about colour?
Sure, love
Yeah,
it.
Simon,
Love
do you want to ask the colour question?
Yeah, I mean, because you have these this different approach where you use watercolor and then pastels on top, or acrylic, and then you'll have mixed media. Do you have certain colors that you will always use? Do you have a palette that you have as a go-to, or as colors that you specifically like to use or work well for you?
Not really.
Next
I
question.
mean, yeah, I work in so many different ways. And I think if I go out and if we do a little studio tour and I'll go out and show you my gazillion pastels, there are certain pastels that I use more often, but that's really because of the subject matter that I tend to do, which I use a lot of greens, and I tend to use a lot of neutralized colors because obviously the neutrals are the backbones, right? It's everything is relative. So when we have a lot of neutrals, that's how we can really make our color pop, right? So I will say, even though I don't have a solid go-to, I tend to enjoy working with a bright underpainting. So very chromatic or very saturated. So if say I'm going to do a sunrise type of a scene, I might automatically think, ooh, I want to use a lot of purples and reds and oranges. Um, and then I can use a lot of those less saturated, more neutral colors on top and get some of the sparkle from underneath. Another way that I would like to work sometimes is to do just a solid one very chromatic wash of color. Like if I was to do a blue hour painting or something, right? Which I've just learned that what the heck? Never heard of blue hour before, right? So maybe I would do like a very, very intense violet wash and then work up from that. So, you know, sometimes I don't do an underpainting at all, but I almost always work on a toned ground. So I don't remember the last time I just worked on a white surface.
Mm. But with acrylics, do you have any colors with acrylic that you've purchased because you know that's one which you'll go through, or it's a go-to color for you?
Well, I have a lot of acrylic paints from years past when I worked in a very different style. And so um, you know, if anything, what I really tend to use more than acrylics these days, because I'm lazy when it comes, I just want to get it done so I can get to the painting a lot of times. And what I'll use is ink.
Wow.
So I will use colored inks because especially with soft pastel, with soft pastel, you want a very rough surface for the most part. There's exceptions. Pastel matte is one type of a surface that's really not rough, but and there's others, but for the most part, you want a rough surface that will catch those little grains of pigment. And so I want a very, very thin wash of pigment, whatever I'm using it, be it ink. There's these new, they're called ink tints. I think they're by Derwent. I reach for those a lot. I often will use Taylor's chalk for an underpainting, which I think it's called Taylor's chalk. And when we do the studio tour, I'll show you. I have it only in a few warm tones, but I really like that because it's very thin. I can wash it out with water, or I'll use gouache often because it doesn't have, the acrylic is polymer, right? So it's essentially plastic. And that the more that you use plastic, it will fill up the tooth of the surface. So I do have some acrylic inks, and I'll tend to use those more than my fluid acrylic, you know, the more viscous fluid acrylics that you would think of for mixed media or just doing acrylic paintings themselves. I don't really reach for that very often.
Do you use I mean, you were saying about the ink tints things, and then also those Taylor's chalks, because I got one of those, a black one, and they basically look like a small bar of soap, right?
Yes.
And they're really, really interesting because you can draw with them as well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
of course, that's what the tailors would use them for, to mark the clothes. But they are water soluble and so intense. They're beautiful. Are you actually drawing with them, Kim, and then using a wet brush? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that I think I love so much about pastel is that it's a drawing medium, really. I mean, some artists, you know, that are solely pastel artists like I am, like to say it's painting. I think to try to give it some, you know, love, because it's like the redheaded stepchild of the art world in a lot of ways. But, you know, I don't really care. I love that it's a drawing medium as well. And you can call it painting or whatever. But so, yes, when I use the Taylor's chalk, I think that I just automatically, just like with pastel or anything else, I want to draw. I like to draw things. So that's one of the reasons that I enjoy that Taylor's chalk. Also the Inktense sticks, because they're kind of like a hard pastel, but then I can go in and turn them into paint, just like with pastel. Soft pastel, I'll often use that as well. And go in and you can create, I mean, you just turn it into liquid paint with water or with anything. It's just the same. So I have all of these different ways that I can create an underpainting. Sometimes it's almost mind-boggling, and like you'll just freeze because it's like too many choices. What am I going to do today? It's when I have to just go back to basics and say, okay, just do something, get out there, you know, start something, just use some black ink. I'll use India ink, which is more brown. It has a more of a warm undertone than the Sumi ink, which is more of a blue undertone. So there's all of these options. And it's just incredible. And so when I start thinking about it, I get excited. I'm like, oh, I got to get out there. Yeah. What am I doing? What do I mean I don't have inspiration?
Absolutely. So are there within your colors, because it's obviously very different to painting in the sense of painters. I mean, I work mainly with a limited palette of 3 colors, sometimes 4. You know, with pastel, and it's maybe one of the reasons I haven't given it much of a go yet, because I see all of these lovely colors. I think I want that one and that one and that one and that one and that one, and all of those to create what I create. Are there any within your massive selection that you hardly use?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that that is one of the cons, if you will, of pastel, of using pastel, is that we have to get this massive collection. I mean, I guess you don't have to, but in order for me to say what I want to say and work in pastel, I have a really big collection of pastels. And now that said, you know, if I had to move into a tiny little studio tomorrow and I had 2 hours and there was a fire, I could go out and grab and say, I want this box. I want this box. I'm taking this set that's nasty looking to everybody else, and it's all a mixture of greens, but I know what's in there. So, you know, there's a whole box of reds that I rarely, if ever, have touched. You know, I mean, I think I also work with a limited palette, and I think that is different, though, compared to if I was working in watercolor or working in acrylic or oil, because like you said, you're mixing them on a palette, and you're actually using your brush and creating those new colors, where with pastel, there is, to some extent, you are doing that to some extent. You're glazing depending on the pressure that you're using, depending on the tone of the surface that you're working on. You can glaze just like you can glaze very, very thin layers with oils or acrylic or watercolor. I mean, it's the same thing. However, it's different in the sense that that only goes so far, in my opinion, with pastels, whereas you can push it a lot farther in the other wet mediums. So that's one of the reasons that I like to keep a lot of the
the sets that I purchase in their original boxes, and I don't take them out. I have I have several plein air sets. Some I've received as for, you know, winning a competition or something. And one I have myself that's just this great big, it was way too big and I got way too excited about plein air. And it's like, you know, how am I supposed to carry this thing around? I've really got to get a smaller plein air box. But anyway, when I'm going out and I say, okay, I want to start something, I know, because I have a full set, say, of Terry Ludwig's, whose colors are just absolutely to die for, beautiful neutrals. I can say, I'm going to use this grayish green value of sticks right here. There might be 6 or 12 that are one color, right? They're one chroma in different value steps, and I'll stick with those. If I had put them all in a box, and jumbled them all up, and a lot of pastel artists do it that way, I am just maybe too obsessive about precision. I wouldn't be able to say, I know that that's the same gray-green value, the exact same chroma oxide with Payne's gray and white mixed in if I was doing it or something. I don't know, but I'm just making up, you know, just so that I could say, I know that in reality, I'm just adding a little bit more of this Payne's gray to it, or I'm adding a little bit more of, you know, a beige, you know, bone white. I don't know. I know that by keeping my palette in that set together. That's how I do it. And that's how I feel, keep a limited palette. Now, I don't know, is that good for me as a pastel artist or bad? I don't know. I mean, I think that, you know, I could try to just work with, say, okay, a warmer, lighter tone, but
Yeah, it's your way.
Yeah.
So I often do this thing when I'm teaching, but I've thought about it a lot. So if, say, I've got an endless supply of white paints in the world, it's fine, but I can only ever have 2 colours. The 2 colours I would choose would be burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, just because you can just create so much with them.
Yes, for sure.
Now, with pastel, if you were to say you've got what would be your 2 colours if you could only save 2?
Oh, goodness. I mean, now we're going back to, who was it that said, oh gosh, was it Matisse? I don't remember, but there was some famous dead artist that said, give me, you know, 1 color and black and white, and I can make you a masterpiece. Or, you know, what mud is to one person is a pure beauty to me. I honestly would probably, there is this one pastel that I just absolutely adore. It's really more the line of the value steps of them. It's a grayish, brownish green. It's very, very muddy looking to somebody else, but it's just pure love to me. And so I would probably keep like the dark tone of that, and probably I don't know, like a very, very, very dark version of that as well. Because then I would at least have a mid-tone and a dark to work with. And if I had to, you know, I could turn it into watercolor by brushing it out, essentially, and creating, you know, I'd have this mid-tone to neutral and a dark, and I would do what I could with those 2 pigments.
So they're your desert island colours, you know. If you had to be,
boring but true.
Well, I want to ask you, because we like to drive our audience to go and, you know, support the artist and view their work, where is it you'd like people to go who've watched this episode or listened to it? Where would you like them to go to see your work and support you?
Oh, thank you. I usually am most active on Instagram. And so that's where I'll post a lot of my work. So that is just Kim_Eshelman, Eshelman. But you can also find my website, which is just kimeshelman.com. And yeah, those are really the two places that you can find me.
That's fantastic. And is there any exhibitions in the near future which you'd like people to see if they're anywhere in your location or nearby?
Well, I do have, I'm for certain, I'm in a exhibition in France. It opens, oh goodness, let's see here. I'm going, and that's why we're taking a few weeks and going to Greece. We'll spend a week in France. It is, I believe it starts July 29th. And it's in Saint-Alais, down in the Cognac region. And so I'll be posting information about that on Instagram and on my website. It's already up. I was in that exhibition a couple of years ago. It's a fabulous organization. It's a society there, and I'm super excited to be there live this year. So that's the only one that I have for certain so far set up this year.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest again. It's such a pleasure talking to you. Thanks, Kim.
Well, I always love talking to you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll have to do it again.
I would love that.
For anyone who's seen, by the way, this studio tour, which Kim's mentioned, is going to be on our Patreon. So if anyone would like to see the studio tour, the Patreon link will be in the description of this video, as will the links for Kim's website, Instagram, and information about the upcoming exhibition.
Excellent.
Thank you, Kim. Lovely to see you.
Take care.
Thanks. Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also, follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.